Good afternoon. My name is Mark Belos. I am the director of the VA Regional Office in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. My responsibility is to oversee monetary benefits for the state of North Carolina. I'm excited to be here today to talk about and to introduce the inaugural Storytellers X program that's taking place in the state of North Carolina. There are fewer and fewer veterans that are individuals that are joining the military today. There's also a misconception about veterans within the society. Most people think that veterans might be broken individuals, or they just see them as a war hero. And there is so much more that veterans do in our communities. Storytellers X is an opportunity for some veterans to come up and talk about their experiences in the military and talk about their successes that have occurred since they've returned to civilian life. It's also an opportunity to bridge that gap between civilians and veterans and to explain to folks and get folks to start talking about the important role that veterans play in our community. So with that being said, we're going to start out by having several veterans come up and talking about their experiences within the military. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Patricia Harris, and I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. Before I get started to talk about what the military done for me, I have to go back and think back when my father got me started with the American Legion. And I talk about this is because it was about service, it was about community, and it was about the commitment. Those are the things that prepared me to start looking at what would I do in case of those times that I must give more of myself like my whole life. My dad told me if I wanted to be in the American Legion that I was going to have to do one thing, and that was to give of my whole self for the protection and the service of this great nation. That is what I did. That was the most rewarding time in my life. It taught me how to be a very strong woman. It taught me how to be a very strong and forward soldier. It gave me all of the things that I was going to need to face the challenges that would come before me. And I was very proud of that service. That same service gave me what I had to have in order for me to become North Carolina American Legion First Woman Department Commander, which, yes, there were challenges, but they were also something that we can always look forward to because we can go through adversity, we can go through those things that we think that would weaken us down. Nothing can when you got a good foundation. Not only did I go on to be that first woman department commander, I also went on to be the alternate NEC. And with all that experience and with all that strength and with all the commitment, it gave me this big heart in looking at what was needed in our community. And that was Women Veterans Support Services. And this is where we came in so she could step up and become that whole woman that she started on when she decided to put her uniform on, whatever branch service it was. WVSS started out to be an advocate for awareness to women issues. And that was something that was important to me because we didn't have anything that would help us at that time. But things have changed, but we're still here. And if you're interested to find out about WVSS, then please visit our website at www.wvss.org and look us up because we're here to assist. We have so many people that are not caring and we have so many that are hurting, but we are here to help. We have her six. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Craig Rose. I'm an employee at the Department of Veterans Affairs VA Regional Office in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I currently serve on the finance team in the role of finance manager. I came on board in September of 2011 and have filled many roles there, but the current one is as the finance manager. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born to two Navy veterans. In 1966, my father was active, passed away in 1967, and from that, going through his memorabilia, his medals, looking at his uniforms as a young man, also talking with my family, my uncle, who is a Vietnam veteran, 2 Purple Hearts, Silver Star, and a grandfather that served in World War II, along with other various family members. I knew early on, just from the passion and pride that they had from their military service, that this was something that I was going to do. So in March of 1985, I enlisted in the Navy, Best Branch. I might be slightly biased, but enlisted in 1985 as an electronics technician. Started out in San Diego. Served on many platforms during my career, and cruisers, amphibious assault support vessels, along with roles as an instructor, inspector, things of that nature. In November of 2002, I was on board USS Bunker Hill, CG-52, an Aegis cruiser that was assigned to a carrier task force that went into the Arabian Gulf. And I don't know if you remember, around that time, we knew something was going to be happening. So many roles that I did on there while we were overseas in that Gulf was as the division chief for the electronics division on board, along with the visit board search and seizure officer doing a UN enforced actions for the oil to food program for Iraq. During that time, we operated primarily off of different vessels. We weren't really on the Bunker Hill as much with that team, and even served with a Polish ship, the Zerniki, which operated far in the northern Arabian Gulf. And just before March 20th, we had ceased operations in the Gulf, the boarding operations, and at that time, the Iraqis were pushing vessels out of Qasr down through the KA waterway out into the northern Arabian Gulf, and we were helping with directing those ships' movements and small boat movements as they fled the area. And then that ceased, and what had happened next was there were mines placed in the KA waterway by the Iraqi government military, and our next operation then became providing security in the KA waterway during those mine operations. So we were going in at night. What resonated with me at that time was the camaraderie that was developed between approximately 24 young men. We had our own boat, our boat crew, and our boarding teams. And through that shared experience and what we went through there was a strong, strong bond and relationship that is very hard to describe to people who have not served. And from that, you get the pride, you get that urgency of, hey, how can I give back? Well, I retired in 2005 and held various positions throughout the state, and a position opened up at Department of Veterans Affairs, and I applied and was lucky enough to get the job. And one of the greatest things of being able to work there is not only do I get to take care of fellow veterans, as well as my family members, is I also get to work with veterans while I'm there. And so that relationship and that bond that's developed carries over into what we do at the VA. And there's a lot of joy, a personal joy and pride that I get from being able to work there and help those veterans, along with working with my fellow veterans at the same time. Also, I have 3 adult children that I'm sure through stories of their uncles and me have joined 3 branches of the service: Marines, Air Force, and Navy. And they do utilize the benefits of the VA that they earn through their service. And so it's with great pride that I take care of my fellow veterans. I view it as also taking care of not only my children, but my mother and other family members, along with my brothers and sisters in the service. So from the experience that I gained while in the military to the joy that I get while going into work, it's not even really a job, it's more of a passion. And it's just an unbelievable opportunity to do that. And I really appreciate you allowing me to spend time with you all and share that story.
All right, so my name is Erwin Mingo. I'm from a small town of Kannapolis, North Carolina. I went to the Marine Corps. I have a beautiful wife and 2 twin boys that was born this year, 2017, on Father's Day, nonetheless. My story starts when I was in high school. I had a lot of family members. They were in the armed forces. Most of them were in the Army. I wanted to do something different, so I went to the Marine Corps. When I graduated, I got attached to Bravo 111, 1st Battalion Marines in Camp Pendleton, California. I had a great set of guys that I worked with. Some I'm still friends with today. I saw a lot of things. Saw a lot of things and lost a lot of friends. Made a lot of friends. I wouldn't change my experiences. If I could do it all over again, I would. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I got out with a service-connected disability. My transition back to civilian world, it wasn't the best. I didn't trust anybody. I stayed to myself, and it was a struggle. It was a struggle, big struggle. I couldn't find any work. The skills that I developed in the Marine Corps, they didn't work in civilian world. So I had to figure out something else to do. For too long, I was drinking alcohol. That was my coping mechanism. I had a strong family that believed in me, that didn't let me fall by the wayside. They just supported me through it all. And eventually I got my act together. And I went through BLET, which is basic law enforcement training. I graduated in 2010. I'm currently in law enforcement now in Mooresville, North Carolina. I've been doing it for about 7 years now, and it's one of the best decisions I've ever made for myself and my family. To all the struggling men and women that are coming home just like me, just believe in yourself. Just know there are people out there who believe in you as well. Keep pushing forward. Don't give up. Just don't give up, because that's the easy way. Stay motivated, and God bless you.
Good afternoon. My name is James Kerrigan. I'm a captain with the Mooresville Fire Department and a Navy veteran. I've been asked to speak today on my story from the Navy into the civilian life. For me, it all started, I was born in Marathon, Florida, where I graduated in 1984. And the following year, I entered the military. I was raised primarily by my stepfather, who had just retired from the Marine Corps after doing 31 years, and he was a master gunnery sergeant. At our house, we flew the flag proudly. We lowered it when necessary and disposed of it properly. Never would we think of dragging it, flying it upside down, or burning it in the streets as a protest. The flag represented the freedom that he and others had fought and died for, and it would not be disrespected. He never raised his hand or his voice at me, even though I feel that I've given him plenty of opportunities. He was just the kind of guy that when he walked into a room, you knew that a Marine was there. He would give me a hard time about my decision about joining the Navy. I would remind him at the bottom of his Marine military ID that the words Department of the Navy were written, and he would laugh and tell me, yeah, the men's department. As a child, I remember spending our summers on the road attending Marine reunions. He was a member of the 1st Marine Division of the Guadalcanal Campaign, which was the first offensive strategy by Allied forces against Japan in World War II. These were grand ballroom-like type reunions. And I remember listening to these people talk and being intrigued by their stories. These were great men that provided a great service for our country, and I admired that. They trusted each other with their lives much as we do in the fire service. I think that's when I had my first desire to join the military and serve my country. I've had many military influences. My biological father was in the Army during World War II. My brother was in the Vietnam War. Several brother-in-laws and nephews, and even my son, joined the Army as a Ranger. I'm very proud of the time that I spent in the service and of all that it served. I feel that all high school grads should do 1 or 2 years serving their country when they graduate. Might do something for our community. As most 18-year-olds are, I had a know-it-all attitude. You couldn't tell me anything. I was just looking for a way to get out of the small-town atmosphere, not knowing later in life that small-town atmosphere was actually paradise. I was too young to know it. I enlisted in the Navy and went off to Great Lakes for boot camp. Times were different then than they are now. No joke, boot camp was tough and very disciplined. After falling up the stairs several times, I'd lost that know-it-all attitude and had a newfound respect for authority. After boot camp, I went to Fort Bliss Army Base to learn how to fire Stinger missiles. It was me, 5 other sailors, 200 Marines, and 5,000 Army guys. Now the Marines and the Army dressed in camo fatigues, and they blended. Us 6 had our cute white Dixie cups, our powder blue shirts, and our dungarees, and we stuck out like sore thumbs. As we would march to class, to the chow hall, to the barracks, or wherever, it seemed that every Jeep that passed that had an officer in it would drive by, and we would end up in a ditch doing push-ups for saluting the Jeep or not saluting the Jeep, doing the right thing, the wrong thing, it didn't matter. After training, the 6 of us sailors went to the Com-6 fleet in Gaeta, Italy. We were assigned to the amphibious fleet to assist with the ship-to-air defense. For those of you not familiar with the amphibious fleet, these are Navy ships that had about 100 or so Navy personnel running the ship, along with about 400 Marines. And our job was to get them from the ship to the shore so they could do their ground hand-to-hand combat. Or as my father-in-law would say, or my stepfather would say, we were the Marines' chauffeur. I remember when we flew into Cyprus to meet a helicopter to fly out to our ship that had already deployed. I remembered 18 years old getting off of that plane and walking directly to a helicopter, and the path that we went on was filled with foreign soldiers that had machine guns. And I remember thinking that if I step out of line, these guys are gonna shoot me. And that's when I realized how serious my job actually was. We would complete that 6 months on their cruise, and we would be transferred to the relief ship's crew. We did this for 2 years, spending most of our time in Modlock off of the coast of Libya, Syria, and Lebanon. We had some good ports. We seen the Dead Sea in Jerusalem, the pyramids in Egypt, and the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I wish I knew now to take more pictures of what I seen then. We didn't have smartphones. After Europe, I went to Charleston on a fast frigate and then at NAS Norfolk for 2 years before I got out. I enlisted at a good time in the military. We were under the administration of President Ronald Reagan, which in my opinion is the best president of my era. Transformation from the military to civilian life was much more acceptable than previous decades. I'd always been associated with the fire service. The island that I grew up on, my family was pretty much the fire department. On the ships that I was on, I was part of the flight deck crew during flight deck operations. So it was no surprise that when I got out that I chose being a firefighter as my career. I did 5 years in Charleston, South Carolina before making Mooresville my home in 1998. I truly enjoy helping people in their time of need. On the walls of each fire station in Mooresville are the words pride, commitment, and integrity. Those are words that I try to live by every day. And I think it's the military that inscribed that in me. Whether we're fighting for a line drawn in the sand or helping somebody at their worst possible moment in life, I'm proud to be given the opportunity to make a difference. Today I feel I'm very blessed. I have a loving wife who supports anything I do, a beautiful little girl that I simply adore, and 3 boys that run to the door when I come home. I have some awesome in-laws and other family members to share these experiences along with 90+ brothers and sisters at the fire department that I know I can call on if needed. My name is James Kerrigan. Thanks for listening to my story.
Hi, my name is Dana Pate, and I enlisted in the United States Air Force in 1991 and retired as a major in 2015.
I am Chris Pape. I'm from Ohio. I'm an electronic media graduate from the University of Cincinnati, and I met Dana in 2001.
And we're excited to be able to have the opportunity to share our experience as a military couple, and I'm excited to share what I believe it means to serve.
And I'm going to talk about a little what it's like to be a military spouse.
So, grew up in Iowa, had an awesome family, a dad that was a Vietnam vet, and I didn't learn too much from him because I was a little bit of a slacker. I begrudgingly enrolled in the local university as an art major, and 2.5 semesters in, I realized I cared more about partying than I did going to class. And it kind of hit me one day that, man, I've got no direction. I need some structure in my life. Next thing I know, I wandered into the recruiter's office, and that was the best decision that I made. I ended up having the coolest job in the Air Force. I got to train pilots, put them in the centrifuge and the altitude chamber. They didn't like me too much, but I loved my job. And started to build up that sense of camaraderie, and it was giving me a lot of confidence that, man, this is awesome. I've got some structure in my life. And the Air Force then was encouraging me to, okay, now that you're training the pilots, you need to go figure out, you need to go feel what they do. So you need to go to the same survival schools and the jump schools. Jump school, okay. All right, so I did my 5 jumps. All right, I got even more confidence. Go to survival school, water survival, and then combat survival. And without going into too much detail, I will say that combat survival school gave me a new perspective on what it means to serve. I had the opportunity to see what POWs went through, to see what our Vietnam vets went through, to see what World War II vets, and all of them. And it was a very humbling experience. And the Air Force must have saw something in me, because shortly after going to all those schools and training the pilots, they awarded me with an ROTC scholarship. So I went to Colorado State, got my degree, and commissioned in 2000. Shortly thereafter, I met this guy.
That's right, I'm the lucky guy. But you know, when Dana and I first met, I didn't know that she was in the Air Force. We lived in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is about 40 or 50 minutes south of Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is where she was stationed. And so when we met online, we kind of, you know, we communicated back and forth for a little bit before actually meeting. And so I had no idea she was in the Air Force until about our third date. And so when I found out, I thought that was really cool, because I thought women in uniform were really hot, but I didn't really know what it meant to be in the military. I was a professional video producer kind of at the beginning of my career, following a successful career trajectory. And so as we were dating and going through the process before getting married, right, I was kind of living my life, having my career, and my philosophy was that she was living her life and having her career. So nothing out of the ordinary from a normal civilian couple.
So kind of, like you said, I went to my job, he went to his, whatever, for husband and wife. I think then I ended up going to Kuwait.
That's right, yeah.
And how did that feel?
Well, before you went to Kuwait, we actually PCS'd a couple times, which I didn't know what PCS meant. I kept saying we're moving, and everybody's saying, oh, you're PCSing, and I'm like, I don't know what PCS means. But yeah, there was probably from the time we got married to the time of your first deployment, several years went by. And again, my mistaken philosophy as a military spouse was, she has her career, I have my career. I had no idea that she had her lifestyle and I had my career, which was slowly turning into her lifestyle. So when she deployed for the first time, that was my first real experience with having a loved one go overseas for 6 or 7 months, and it was quite different. You know, everybody treated me a little differently at work, my family treated me a little differently, and I didn't like it so much because I'm kind of a private person.
So I came back from that deployment, and I had the opportunity as the military personnel flight chief. I was directly supervising 50-some people, and we took on a project called Operation Kudos, which the Kudos stood for Kids Understanding Deployment Operations. There were so many kids on that base where their parents were deploying, and we wanted to give them a better understanding what it meant when mom and dad left to deploy. So we would put them, all these kids, they went through a deployment processing line. We gave them orders, we gave them a backpack, we gave them medicine in the form of a jelly bean. We let them fire weapons, Nerf weapons. They got to play with the K9 dogs, and then finally we got them in the C-130 aircraft, where as the officer in charge, I got to brief all of these kids. So I started off by asking, hey, raise your hand here if your mom or your daddy is deployed. And just about every hand went up. And then before I could start the briefing, there was one boy that in the back, he said, my daddy deployed, but he didn't come home. I was stunned. And at that moment, it hit me even further and further refined what it means to serve. When we raise our right hand, it not only affects me, the service member, but it affects the spouse. We don't have children, but man, that little boy, that affected his life. So that opportunity made me a better leader, and also, I hope, made me a better spouse in recognizing just what it is to raise your right hand. It doesn't only impact you, but it impacts all of your family.
It did, and I remember that time, and I remember how affected you were. And that's the funny thing, is that Dana was affected by it, but I wasn't. I was still ignorantly bliss about my lifestyle as a military spouse. You know, she started paying more attention to me and wondering about my needs, and I'm like, I'm still gainfully employed, having a good time with you. I don't understand why you're so, you know, appreciative of what I do as a spouse, because I haven't done anything differently since we met. But that all started to change. I'm going to kind of hog the mic here just a little bit because it takes a few minutes to set up. But shortly after Dana had that experience, we PCS'd to Columbia, South Carolina. And my career as a video producer was as I mentioned before, still on the upward trajectory. Well, we moved to a very small market. We were only there for a couple of years, and I couldn't find employment. And we were only there for 2 years, so I didn't have time to open my own business. I didn't have time to make the connections needed to bring money in for the family and to do my share of the marriage, you know. So I was very frustrated with this. I got online and started looking for military spouse organizations to learn how other military spouses have been able to overcome, you know, the experiences of trying to maintain and grow a career while being married to a member of the military. And I found probably 400 or 500 different websites and organizations talking about military spouses and, you know, how to help with careers. And the problem was, though, is that all of those organizations were written by women for women because the traditional military spouse is female. Those websites had some good information in there, but it wasn't specifically tailored to a male and definitely not tailored to a video producer. So I got really frustrated with the whole search, and after talking with Dana for a little while, I said, you know, I'm here in Columbia, South Carolina for a couple years with nothing to do. I'm going to use my training as a video producer who has experience creating educational videos and training videos, and I'm going to start my own organization. And I'm going to make this organization tailored for men by a man. And I called that organization Macho Spouse. And so I spent the next couple years driving around the country, interviewing on video a bunch of other male military spouses. And I didn't want this website to be just kind of a, oh, woe is me, look, I can't find a job type of website. I wanted it to be more of a proactive, engaging experience that would give a blueprint for other guys to learn how to best handle military life. And so a couple of interviews grew to a couple more, to a couple more. Before I knew it, I was driving all over the country, interviewing not just military spouses, but, you know, military family researchers, military family clinicians, PhD level psychologists, and financial experts. And it really brought me in to the whole community that Dana had been living, the lifestyle that Dana had been living, kind of without me for the last 8 years, for the previous 8 years. And so I can say, yes, I went through 8 years of marriage with Dana without realizing that I was a military spouse.
And along the way, he made even more connections with top-notch generals and admirals. I couldn't believe that he was finding connections with these people. It was astonishing, and I'm so very proud of him. And he's being very humble in not mentioning the fact that he was the 2014 Air Force Spouse of the Year. And I think maybe only the second male ever to be recognized with that. And unfortunately, when he was recognized with that, the Air Force said, congratulations, we're in the PCSU to San Antonio, and oh, by the way, Dana, get on a plane because you're going to Djibouti, Africa. Djibouti is just a fun name to say. But so I'm deployed in Djibouti, Africa, trying to watch him online several time zones away. The connection was horrible, and here I am trying to watch my husband get recognized for Air Force Spouse of the Year. So I'm incredibly proud of, you know, where we've come as a military couple, and being able to communicate across time zones, where we've come as far as communication with each other, but then more importantly, avenues like this where we're able to advocate for other military couples and share our experiences, how we get through this.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that moment in San Antonio, I think that's when we both realized that, you know, this military lifestyle, it is such a commitment, and you weren't able to physically be there for one of the most proud moments of my life. And I haven't been able to physically be there for some of the most proud moments of your life because you've been in war zones, you know, and I've been watching football. But, yeah, you know, so in San Antonio, I think we both came to the decision, hey, 24 years is a long time. Well, let's transition to the civilian life. Let's retire with honor and go chase our dreams.
Yeah, it was when the Air Force was having some major budget cuts and telling people, thank you for your service at 20 years, but see you later out the door. And so for me to be able to make that decision on my own and say, you know what, it's time, and it's, you know, kind of a side note, our our wedding song was "Follow You, Follow Me," and it's time for me to follow him and let him pursue his goal of becoming a real estate agent, and so here we are.
Here we are. And just real quick about transitioning into civilian life. I know there's a lot of people who talk about it and veterans who do retire after a long career and move into the civilian sector and struggle with it at times. And I don't think what a lot of people realize, and this is what I witnessed firsthand, is Dana was going through some of the same struggles that I went through in my early 20s, right? When I graduated high school and college, and you've got the whole world in front of you, and you're like, well, what do I do when I grow up? It took years for me to figure out my career path and my life path after that moment. And now Dana has to do that, 20 years later, 25 years after me. And so as I think a lot of military families, my advice I would give is you just have to be patient, with the retiring member. You've got to be encouraging, and you have to remember that he went through the same thing. You did the same thing. Don't get frustrated with him today, because 25 years ago, I guarantee you there was somebody in your life that was getting impatient with you, but may have helped encourage you a little more than put you down. So transition isn't always easy. It hasn't been the easiest for us, but we're so happy we're here, and things are really looking good now.
And with the Lake Norman community, we love it here. And then the added bonus for me to help me through my transition has been Richard's Coffee Shop. I tell you what, I walk through that door, and if I'm stressed, my shoulders immediately come down. It's comforting, it's good for the soul, it's comforting knowing that everybody in that room, whether they're a World War II vet, Vietnam vet, they speak my language. So I'm grateful for that, grateful for this community, and grateful for this opportunity for us to share our story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Senior Master Sergeant Jim Keiger, First Sergeant, United States Air Force, retired. I am not here to tell you my story today. The story that I'm going to tell you is about one man in one place here in this town in Mooresville, North Carolina. But to get to that, I'm going to have to set it up just a little bit. I joined the Air Force in 1971 and spent 24 years on active duty. When I left active duty in 1995, I became a JROTC instructor in Wilkes County, North Carolina. It was probably the most difficult transition that I ever made in my life. Going from active duty to civilian, I was lost. The thing that kind of kept it a little bit together for me is that I was in a uniform for 10 more years. So after 34 years of wearing a uniform, my wife and I wound up coming down to Mooresville. That was the first time in my life that I ever followed my wife anywhere. About a month or so after we got here, I was told about a place called Richard's Coffee Shop. And I was told by a couple of guys that I had met here that it was one of the most amazing places on the face of the earth. All right, I'm the kind of guy that has to see this to believe it. So I go down Main Street one Thursday, and this is probably a good 12 years ago now, and I walk into Richard's. And standing in front of me is Richard Warren. Kind of small guy, very unassuming, glasses, and I said, wow, what is this guy all about? I'll come to find out that Richard was a chopper pilot in Vietnam, a true hero, and a lover of everything that is dear and near to us. This guy opened me with welcome arms, said, welcome home, brother, glad to have you here. And he proceeded to tell me what the coffee shop was all about. There was memorabilia all over the wall, military memorabilia all over the wall, comfortable couches to sit in, and he didn't actually make too bad of a cup of coffee. So we sat there and I had conversations with about 5 or 6 guys, and the next Thursday I was back, and the Thursday after that, and the Thursday after that, and this went on for months. And the next thing I know, I'm hooked into what the coffee shop is all about. Being with veterans, sharing time with veterans, listening to the problems that they have, and trying to help each other out. That is what Richard's Coffee Shop was all about. Well, one of the things that Richard wanted to do is he wanted to establish a different kind of a place. He wanted a place where veterans could go forever. And to do that, it needed to be a nonprofit. A number of guys got together and they started working on that for him. And sadly, to us, he passed away before he saw that dream come true. We lost one heck of a veteran when Richard passed away. However, his legacy lives on. We had 2 different moves. We moved the shop twice, all on Main Street, and now we're on a permanent location directly across from his original shop. And the place is amazing. We've had over 15,000 veterans come through the doors of Richard's Coffee Shop in the last years. And every one of them says the exact same thing. You guys have something that is very, very, very special, and we do. It is a place where we can go, and no matter what the worries of the world are, we can walk into those halls of that place, and we can let it all go. It is an amazing place of healing. I have seen guys literally leave their PTSD at the door, and the therapy there was probably better than anything that they have ever received anywhere. It's a national treasure. This is a one-of-a-kind place in the United States of America. So when you see this video, I'm going to ask you to do one thing. Look up Richard's Coffee Shop at Welcome Home Veterans. Find out where we're at, and if you make it over here to North Carolina, please come through the door. Yesterday, we said hello to 7 Coast Guard captains. Today, a Rear Admiral. But there is no rank in that shop. It doesn't make any difference whether you're enlisted, whether you're an officer, whether you're Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, or Coast Guard, Marine Corps or Coast Guard. You are always welcome here. You will find a place of true solitude and true healing, where all the veterans will welcome you and make you feel like you are part of something special because you were. I'm going to tell you a quick story about one man. Many years ago, I met John. And I'm not even sure I can make it through this story today. But John was one of the most amazing human beings that I have ever met. And in his shop, he had a plaque. And on the plaque, there was a spark plug, a bullet, and a Purple Heart. Now, John served in World War II on the USS California. He was a very young man. And at a very young age, he wound up getting severely injured after a kamikaze aircraft slammed into the USS California, killing about 40 of his fellow sailors, but it blew John completely out of the turret that he was in and up onto another deck. He was burned over 75% of his body. He had horrible, horrible injuries, not to mention the fact that he had a really severe head injury. He laid up on that deck for hours and hours and hours until somebody finally saw him move and they transferred him to a hospital ship, where he was treated for a wound where they took a spark plug out of the Mitsubishi engine from that kamikaze out of his head and was embedded into the lower part of his brain. He survived all of those injuries, and 2 years later, he goes to work for Ma Bell as a pole climber. Now he's up on top of a pole one day, and all of a sudden his arm freezes up and he cannot move. So he finally gets down off of the pole and he sees a doctor that was a former flight surgeon, and they go in and they cut a piece of .50 caliber bullet that was embedded in his arm. The bullet, the spark plug, and his Purple Heart. But the only reason we got to know that story was some years later, he came out and visited Sharon and I convinced him to go with me to breakfast. And he said, well, where are we going to go? I said, oh, you don't have to worry about it. This is someplace really cool. And then we go into the coffee shop, and he was mad as blazes at me. He was a guy who was very private, did not like to talk to other veterans, and did not want to share his experiences. But there was somebody working there who took him into the back and sat down and got him to tell his whole story for the very first time. Without Richard's Coffee Shop, my father-in-law would have never told his story. John was one of the greatest guys that I've ever known, and I'm proud to have known him. Unfortunately, we lost him some years back, but you know what? Without Richards, and without Welcome Home Veterans, that story never would have been able to be told. Look, come over to Richards. Come to Welcome Home Veterans. I promise you one thing. I promise you that you'll enjoy it, and you will never forget your visit. God bless.